I am introducing today, along with a bipartisan group of my colleagues, including the ranking member and former chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security, and that's very relevant given some of the arguments that have made for this bill, legislation that would roll back the ban on internet gambling that Congress, I think, somewhat imprudently adopted last year. I must tell you that I don't think, sometimes the members of the House are paying more attention to substance than at other times. I think this bill was other times. We have in this legislation, as it's introduced, safeguards against the misuse of the money. And there are really two arguments here. We are perfectly prepared to talk about how to strengthen those safeguards. And as I said, I'm very glad to have the ranking member and former chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security, who's as expert in these matters as anybody in the House. But the fundamental issue here is a matter of individual freedom. This is an intrusion on individual liberty. There are a lot of our fellow citizens who like to gamble on the internet. They harm no one. They are engaged in an activity that they enjoy. It is not an activity I myself enjoy, but I've noted previously, if the world were to be limited to doing only these things I enjoy, that would pose a number of problems. In fact, no member of Congress ought to arrogate to himself or herself the right to censure the leisure time activities of other people. The revenue that's in this bill, we have a fee, and the fee is in this bill enough to cover the expenses. There is a potential for this to raise more money, but that would not be within the jurisdiction of the Financial Services Committee. And it may well be that we could raise more money. This particular law has been found to be in violation of America's obligations under the World Trade Organization. And it is interesting that some of my colleagues who tell us that we can't interfere with the World Trade Organization for global warming or the rights of workers are perfectly prepared to ignore it on behalf of interfering with people's right to gamble.
The main reason I am coming onto this bill is, one, I do support the right of the people to engage in gambling, but also this is the first time under Chairman Frank's bill that we do have a federal regulatory enforcement network in place. I think that is very, very important. Having FinCEN to be doing the licensing, to be overseeing this, to me, is going to have a very positive effect as far as law enforcement, as far as Homeland Security, and just it addresses many of the concerns that people had. I know particularly in here there is language which will allow professional sports to opt out and have the gambling prevented in their sports. So to me, the precautions are there so that this is going to allow what millions and millions of Americans want to do, allow them to go forward and continue doing it, but do it in a way where, to the extent possible, there is going to be effective regulation, an effective network of regulation and enforcement, which is going to protect people from themselves, protect society from those who would be using this for ulterior purposes, and again, that does preserve individual liberty. So I am proud to be a co-sponsor with Chairman Frank. I commend him for his leadership in this, and I thank him for giving me the opportunity to come on as a co-sponsor.
Now it does not raise any revenue because it would be outside the jurisdiction of our committee. It puts a licensing fee on, but it is calibrated to be one to simply reimburse the government for the expenses involved in the licensing. Hearings on this one probably be June before we can get to it, just given the crowded agenda we have. And frankly, I'm in no great rush because I think it is useful for members to hear from their constituents. I think this is already all over the internet. People are talking about this, and I think members are already beginning to hear about it.
I am strongly supporting this because this does, for the first time, set in place the strong regulatory framework at the federal level.
And frankly, there are a lot of people who are not normal watchers of C-SPAN. People who like to gamble on the internet. People who watch poker on television rather than us. And there's a group of people who've been activated here. And I think you're going to see a number of members of Congress, I know you're going to see members of Congress hearing from people saying, why did you do this? Please change your mind. So I do think there is more reason to think this is people are ready to change their minds. That is, I think people hadn't thought a great deal about it. They came to it as a kind of issue of first impression, and they're going to be hearing from a lot of their constituents.